Get strong.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of My Great Aunt Edna, the leadership show that focuses on excellence, doing things the right way, no shortcuts, and accountability. I'm your host, McNeil, and today our guest is Dr. David Glover. And Dr. Glover is the founding visionary of Ennoblement LLC, a consulting company for executive coaching and organizational development. He is also the creator of the initiative I Like Me and Spiritual Fine Arts. David's 20-year career background spans nonprofit, religious, and corporate organizations, and has also been a featured international presenter and speaker. He's the author of an award winning book, Building and Maintaining Organizations. And with that, I want to introduce everyone to Dr. Glover. Dr. Glover, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm so honored to be here to make it onto the show. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity to share and to be enlightened at the same time.
Outstanding, and thank you. So I want to jump right into it. So introduce everyone beyond what I just said in the bio. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you've come to be to the point you are in your career.
Okay, I'll give you cliff notes because that's the only way we'll make it. But a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised there, moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 2009. Came here under duress. But it was the best thing that I needed to help my trajectory. Sometimes life helps you govern what you need more than you think you need it, right? So I didn't really know how much change was needed for my blossoming, for me to come into who I am
Mhm.
until I came kicking and screaming to Atlanta. And you would think coming from Milwaukee, who wants to really, that change should have been apparent, but it wasn't. I wanted New York. So, but being here, I've been able to matriculate through, education to my master's and doctorate degree, as well as, starting my own business. And, what I'm most excited about is even being here connected me with doors of doing business in South Africa, in
Mhm.
Johannesburg, Botswana, and Cape Town. And so, I'm excited about what things are coming, but it's, that's kind of a short introduction of where I am right now beyond what you've already given them.
Thank you for that elaboration. And we talked a little bit about, that Midwest kind of mindset. I'm right here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so it was all new to me. And then it's a big transition going from the Midwest to the Southeast. So talk to me a little bit about that transition and then, keep it around the lens of leadership. Like what were the differences you noticed between the Midwest and Atlanta, Georgia?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and it's probably one that's not as often thought about. When we talk about leadership in courses and education and all of those things, we kind of put U.S. into Western civilization leadership
Mhm.
versus other countries. But even the sub categories and regions in United States, what I noticed was that from Milwaukee at least, leadership was very upfront about their microaggressions
Mm.
or their stereotypes or their, it was very, you knew what you were up against from the jump. Like when you walked in,
Mhm.
they, without having an HR case, told you what they believed your
Yeah.
parameters were. Versus when I came down here, I had to adjust to the fact that it was implicit. Like if you didn't know, you was going to know until it was too late.
Mhm.
Like why your trajectory was limited, because it didn't matter how many dinners you had with the big boss, you weren't part of that, that clique, or you didn't look the part, or
Yes.
you didn't walk the walk. And so it became a learned pattern, something that you had to kind of just lean on others to kind of know how to flow, how to play the game.
Mhm.
So I think one thing that I think I found the most alarming was the hidden and truths of organizations and cultures.
Okay. No, that's a good take on it. And actually, I find that interesting because moving here I actually heard the inverse, about in Minnesota anyway. There's a term called Minnesota nice. And,
Mhm.
everybody in Minnesota is nice, but it's a fake nice. It's a lot of that, you talked about the microaggressions. It's a lot of that passive aggressive style where they really
Mhm.
don't tell you. So I find that interesting that your take is, going to the Southeast, but being from the Southeast, I do understand what you're talking about, like with the you're not in that group. You're not in that good old boy network or
Mhm.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that. I want to change the subject a little bit and talk about your I Like Me initiative because the title just stands out because so many people don't like themselves, and we experience that a lot. Corporate America, personal life, you can see it on social media. So tell me a little bit about I Like Me, and then how did that come to be?
So, I Like Me is an initiative originally developed for young adults
Hmm.
and children to deal with childhood trauma for
Okay.
childhood resiliency. So, anti bullying, being able to embrace themselves, all of those different things that they experience as children. But the truth is, as I developed it, as I, even went through, becoming a psychologist and all of those different things, it it's so much bigger, right? Like there's no sect of people or no fragment of persons that can't use that development, those same tools, because privileges happen to each category one way or the other,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it came to be because, out of my own trauma, my life. In my second book, which is my memoir, Born Out of Pain, talks
Hmm.
about that whole life of, being raised in a very strict, and I mean ultimate strict religious Pentecostal home, and
Hmm.
how I didn't fit in, and how even though I had memorized the whole Bible. I mean, I was able to, get with the
Yeah.
best of them, and I was a star church child, right? But it was the mark of and I had never accepted it or even acknowledged being a homosexual, same gender loving, or
Hmm.
LGBT queer, whatever you want to call it, right? I
Yeah.
did not,
Yeah.
because of course we were taught that it was an abomination, you were going to hell.
Hmm.
So that was something that limited me and gave me great stress and all of those things. And so I experienced, going to school, being bullied, being thrown downstairs,
Wow.
being jumped on, being on, all those different things, where I had teachers that literally for lunch told me to come into their classroom to eat my lunch with them. So it was a protection.
Hmm.
I mean, and then go home to a brother, or older brother, who was just trying to toughen me up and make
Hmm.
a man out of me. And then I had a stepfather who tried to seek the shock treatment to do the anti-gay. And then go to a church where I loved church, but they
Hmm.
hated me, but they loved me because they could use all of my gifts, because I was the soloist, I was the
Hmm.
director, I could play the drums, I could play, I had
Yeah.
all of the gifts. I could even prophesy and preach and quote the Bible, and I
Hmm.
lived holy, right? But
Hmm.
it was just that earmark of, we still can't let you in because you're on the outside. And that caused, at 6 years old, an evangelist looked at me, and I didn't even know what it was. She looked at me and said, "Oh, you're gay and you're going to hell." I'm
Hmm.
6 years old. I had never heard the
Oh
word
man.
gay before. So when I
Yeah.
went home to my mother and told her, because I'm glad I didn't tell her who said it, I just said, "What's
Yeah.
gay and why am I going to hell?" It started a whole long, where I tried to commit suicide 3 times. One at,
Ooh.
11, one at 16, and one at, 18,
Hmm.
because of just that stress of trying to live something that I didn't know how. No one gave me tools. No one told me to accept me, to like me, any of those things. And so out of that
Hmm.
arose I Like Me. So it sits on the premise of being able to be self create, which is self care,
Hmm.
self respect, self esteem, self accept, self trust, and self
Hmm.
empowerment. So, and it doesn't matter who you're talking to; those principles still are applicable.
Okay, so that was really, really good and deep. I mean, you shared a lot of personal stuff there, that I could see where that would be traumatic and
Hmm.
probably still would cause some issues even in adulthood. So,
Hmm.
how do
Yes.
you work with adults that are in that situation that you come across, that are just, they haven't been as forward as you are, as who you are, right? How do you work with them as a leader in leadership thought process?
So for me, it comes down to still that self-acceptance, that
Hmm.
self-transparency. You have to be, when we talk about authenticity, and I believe Brene Brown is a very good person about being having that ability to allow yourself to be, right.
Hmm.
Um, I think that even in leadership, and it doesn't matter what type of trauma, where the trauma is, or because sometimes it's just that you have flaws that you just think if someone sees them, they'll think you're not worthy to be
Yeah.
in leadership, right?
Yeah.
You don't know, you kind of faked your way or sleep, got to where you are and you think imposter syndrome, all those different things.
Hmm.
It still comes down to being able to accept yourself. When you have enough grace for yourself to know that, hey, I'm not good in these type of situations, or I'm dealing with this.
Hmm.
Right now at my company, that I work, I'm on an ERG, and it causes me to have to push myself beyond where I'm comfortable. And so
Hmm.
I had to first have a mentor that was able to say, hey, do what's safe for you, but understand pros and cons of all of it, and then make
Yeah.
a healthy decision. But it starts with being able to have that self emotional intelligence, right?
Hmm.
Being able to say, hey, this is my trigger. This is
Hmm.
what happens in these situations. What can I do to mitigate it or
Yeah.
to manage it? Or it's something I need not go into. So when you're talking about leadership, because believe it or not, we try and say that we have these different personalities. So you have a home you have a work you have a church you have an organizational you. No, you are a really one person. And I
Hmm.
don't care how you may move your voice to sound a different type of way, which is code
Hmm.
switching. But
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
still the person behind the code switching it, right?
Hmm.
So the
Hmm.
triggers will switch you right back if you're not careful. So the first thing you need to do is actually be honest, saying, hey,
Yeah.
this is just what it is. And I get help for it, get support for it, staff it if I'm weak in that area,
Hmm.
or but that sometimes I have to reconcile that with an authentic mindset.
Yeah. So I love that. And again, I'm going to change gears here just a little bit. So you've had the opportunity to work internationally in Africa. A lot of people haven't had that opportunity. So one, tell me about the experience. Like, why were you there? But then, how is that environment different than the U.S.?
So it came about last year when I released Born Out of Pain.
Hmm.
Um, my PR was actually able, and it was serendipitous because I was looking to get on a TEDx. I wanted to, that
Hmm.
was kind of the
Yeah.
speaker's kind of roadmap that I had for myself, and they happened to be having in Johannesburg a TEDx session, and I was actually the last person they accepted into the program to be able to do it. So, and of course, it was for me, it was more than a no-brainer. It's like not
Hmm.
only do I get to be on TEDx, but I get to say I was in TEDx in South Africa. Like, who's doing that? Like, boom, right?
Yeah.
So when I got there, though, again, when it's for you or when it's your path, it will align its own self. You just have to be available, right?
Hmm.
So when I got there, I'm there talking about childhood resiliency. We went to the school and met with the Ministry of Education, had
Hmm.
great conversation with the children. It was miraculous. It was wonderful. But then I was presented as, this LGBTQ ambassador. It was an
Mm.
announcement to me too, because I'm like, no, that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about childhood, but in Botswana, um, they had they had just gotten a new president, and they had rescinded the ban for SGL, for so that the
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Yeah.
community could thrive. And so it was actually, they were like, oh my God, we could use your assistance, we can use your knowledge, with
Hmm.
all things as a psychologist, as a part of the community already. So that's how it happened. What I noticed the difference um, is that number one, they're both more forthcoming and underhanded,
Mm.
and there's a balance of it.
Okay.
So they don't mind telling you, no, this is not going to work. Versus, don't call us, we'll call. And you have to read between those lines in the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah.
they're going to say, yeah, this is not going to work. I hope you have success. Maybe you can call me back if you, they'll tell you you're not waiting and you're not
Yeah.
trying to. But at the other on the other side, there is a lot more bribery, a lot more,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's much more acceptable. So
Mhm.
there's ways that you have to go about it, and then learning all of the nuances, of course, of their culture. And being from America, they look at you to be advanced. They look at you to come in and already. So you have to have a shift that mindset.
So you just mentioned something interesting, and again, I'm going to take a little bit of turn off of something that you said that you didn't mention to them that, hey, I'm going to be a representative of the LGBTQ plus population, but they automatically assume that, right?
Yes.
So, and I'm trying to make this a broader conversation right here because a lot of people watching, whether you are a woman, whether you are a black man, whether you are whatever it is, a straight white male, like you don't want that attachment to be automatic. When you show up, like I don't automatically want to be representing all black men when I get up to speak just because I'm a black man, right?
Hmm.
White women don't want to get up to represent all white women when they speak because they happen to be a white woman. So one, how often does that happen to you? But then two, like how do you segment that part of yourself, because it is part of you, but into I'm just a leader and I'm a psychologist and I'm a doctor and I'm intelligent and I have experiences beyond this of who I am. But how often does that happen? And then how do you segment that?
So, um, wonderful question, very
Hmm.
timely, because it happens more often than not. So
Hmm.
I work in an organization as a change manager.